Hello, and what is up, my dog? How are things with you? I've had a weird and busy few weeks, months, years myself, and I wanted to make this video to close the circle on the Rust shooting and tell you about a deeply ironic subtext to the case that I didn't see being discussed online really anywhere or in the major media. And so I felt like it was a good short subject for a video that I should make, debriefing on the aftermath of a very weird trial. I've been trying to figure out how to tell this story, and it finally crystallized in my mind as I was watching Alec Baldwin crying his eyes out at the end of trial.
So my dad was a riflery coach on Long Island in a very suburban, area, and he coached riflery for 28 years. We would go down there and we would shoot, and of course he would roll up a mat, the mats that the rifleman would use for the prone position, they get down on the ground, and we would roll up a mat and rest the gun on the mat. We didn't hold the gun regulation style when we were kids, we would rest like it was on a stand, and we would rest it on the thing and shoot, and then we would go to the matches all the time and watch my dad, come down 2 clicks, come right 3 clicks, him instructing them, and the very quiet, whispered instructions, because the rifle tournaments were like chess matches. Everybody was very muted and very quiet.
The conclusion of the Alec Baldwin trial was surreal, to say the least, especially because I felt like I had this unique insight into the backstory of Alec Baldwin. So it felt like kismet, and like I had to make a video about it. I had one thought hovering in my mind as Baldwin gradually lost his composure after Judge Summer announced the dismissal with prejudice. I know what Alexander Ray Baldwin III must have been thinking. Finally, the disapproving voice of his father, ringing in his ears, subsided, and Alec finally felt some peace with the result of the trial. I've been chronicling the Baldwin diaspora for a while, and to be honest, I was terribly burnt out on true crime as a whole. So for the most of the week of the trial, I was intermittently checking in to see what was happening, but it was a very boring trial. And most of it was actually taken up with the crime scene tech Popple being on the stand for what seemed like forever. And she reminded me a lot of Jill Shively. She had that sort of look from the O.J. Simpson trial. Of course, everything always goes back to the O.J. Simpson trial with me. And the whole thing was just deathly boring until Friday came along, and things got a lot more interesting. There was actually some intrigue going on, and enough so that I wanted to watch back certain segments of the trial because it seemed like there was definitely a level of planning by the defense attorneys and some foreknowledge. A lot of different things foreshadowed the end of the trial, like the defense's obsession with discovery violations or litigating them in the run-up to trial. There was a number of motions about things that were seemingly minor to me, like emails not being redacted or the defense harping on the fact that the gun was destroyed. And it seemed to sort of fit in with the theme. And just overall, the presentation seemed a little bit too well prepared to be spontaneous. But anyway, yeah, just a very interesting wrap up to what was an underwhelming trial for the first few days. At the very end of the trial, it turned into something more like a farce as the proceedings were derailed by Baldwin's team's clever maneuver. He had his own dream team of attorneys, and I actually think that my estimation of Alex Spiro and Luke Nikas has gone up considerably in actually watching them practice. I think both of them did an amazing job. And also the fact that they had this really great plan, I think, in their back pocket the whole time. Towards the denouement of the trial, as the lead prosecutor, Carrie Morrissey attempted to Hail Mary by entering the witness box, it was very clear to anybody watching that something had gone terribly awry. It reminded me of almost like a sitcom, like some weird fragment of a memory I have about like the finale of Seinfeld, just like such a slapstick, almost like a Marx Brothers comedy happening. It was just bizarre, and yeah, it made no sense. When Morrissey, towards the end of her testimony, started groveling about how much she admired Baldwin's acting and liked his politics.
The truth of this matter is, you don't like Mr. Baldwin very much, do you?
You know, that is absolutely untrue. I actually really appreciate Mr. Baldwin's movies. I really appreciated the acting that he did on Saturday Night Live, and I really appreciate his politics.
And then I want try to be careful about the way they phrase this, but it seemed very clear to me that she was dissembling about whether or not she had called Baldwin a series of very colorful names, colorful and derogatory names.
You called him an arrogant prick to another witness.
To who? To what witness?
I'm asking you, did you call him an arrogant prick during a witness interview?
I don't believe I did. I don't recall.
The story about the Alec Baldwin case became something else than what happened on a movie set on October 21st, 2021. I actually think that Morrissey's performance on the stand could have been one of the main things that Judge Summer had in her mind as she dismissed the case with prejudice, because of the nature of a Brady violation one of the elements has to do with like the prosecution not dealing in good faith. And it was clear to me that she was hiding the ball on the stand at the end and not wanting to make herself look worse than she already had. The fact that she willingly subjected herself to a cross-exam from Alex Spiro was wild. On the eve of the trial, the New York Times Magazine published a really great article called "How Did the Case Against Alec Baldwin Get So Far?" Jonathan Mahler was the author. And he put together all these great details of how the original prosecutor on the case was incensed by Alec doing the George Stephanopoulos interview, which was one of the reasons why charges were pursued, or at least that's the way the article framed it. The article also detailed the chaos on the set and the accidental discharges, a couple of them that had happened already, and the walkout of a bunch of the crew. I think the article was really great, and it touched on the edges of the thing that I really wanted to talk about, and it was sort of frustrating for me in that regard, because Mahler references the work of John Ford, the great director of Western films, and he even compared in the middle of the article the legal wranglings in the Rust case to a Western. But he missed one crucial element of the story. One of the ways that I found my way into this hidden passage was by rereading a 2008 New Yorker profile of Alec Baldwin called "Why Me?" The piece was written by a longtime New Yorker contributor, Ian Parker, and it's well worth a reread. I'll put a link in the description. It's full of great and unguarded quotes from Alec and his brothers, especially Stephen Baldwin. He gives some really amazing quotes in the piece, and some really interesting and, in retrospect, very revealing anecdotes that Parker reveals. Also, the article was written in the aftermath of the voicemail scandal where Baldwin left his 11-year-old daughter, Ireland, a angry, wild, nuts voicemail calling her a thoughtless little pig, amongst other things. So his stock on one level was pretty low in terms of the public's estimation of him. But on the other level, he was starring in 30 Rock, so like the professional end of his career, and especially the money end of it, was the best it was ever going to get. About a third of the way into the article, Ian Parker recounts a very revealing, in retrospect, anecdote about how Alec had written a screenplay that he wanted to do with his 3 younger actor brothers that was a Western. The thread that we're following here that I want to talk about is the family dynamic of the Baldwins. So this has an outsized meaning for me. And the fact that it was a Western, of course, has another layer of irony entirely. That is the untold story of the Rust case. Here's a quote from the article where I've cleaned it up, made it a little bit shorter. Alec Baldwin once wrote a screenplay for a Western. He and his 3 younger brothers, Daniel, Billy, and Stephen, were to portray a family of unnaturally skilled gunfighters. As Billy Baldwin recently recalled, basically it was Daniel's the outlaw, I'm the riverboat gambler who gets all the pussy, the shallow, good-looking sap, Stephen's the village idiot, and he's the fucking hero, referring to Alec. He's the one who saves the day at the end. He's Clint Eastwood. If you're looking for how my brother thinks about his brothers and how he always felt about his brothers, that's it. That's the movie he wanted to make with his brothers. After this passage on Alec's Western screenplay, we go directly into an even more revealing section on the Baldwin's childhood growing up in Massapequa, Long Island. Alec speaks to Ian Parker in great detail about his rough and tumble upbringing in a large Irish Catholic clan with a high school history teacher father, Alexander Ray Baldwin Jr., and a stay-at-home part-time substitute teacher mom, Carol. The most telling detail up front in this anecdote is that Alec's father was a riflery instructor. Here's a quote from Baldwin that I think is, again, quite revealing. I've been thinking about whether or not I should try to do his voice, and fuck it, I'm kind of like a little bit hoarse anyway, so we're just gonna give it the old college try here. My father was tough, Baldwin told me. No, I want you to know something. My father was tough. My father would chaperone at high school dances, and the toughest guy in the high school used to want to fight my father. My father broke his hand on a guy's head once in school. The kid was drunk. It was a big masculine challenge for him to pick a fight with my father. My father wasn't a violent or mean-spirited person, but he was a very strict disciplinarian in school. And he knew that some of these kids only understood one thing. The older I got, I learned to behave as he did, which was to not be afraid of anybody. And I'm not afraid of anybody. Wherever I go, I don't have a drop of fear in my whole body. Never, never. Alec's brother Billy is then quoted in the piece about how much Alec idolized his father, and it comes across in all of Alec's descriptions of his dad. In Alec's quotes about Alexander Jr., all roads seem to lead to an idealized masculine authority figure and the films of John Ford. In other words, Westerns. Alec has often spoken about how much his father loved How Green Was My Valley, which is John Ford's masterpiece, a film about a close-knit mining family who's torn apart by a mining strike in response to the big boss man cutting wages. I covered this a little bit in a previous thing I did, made a short video on called The Winter of Alec Baldwin's Discontent, if you want a little bit more info on the How Green Was My Valley connection. The deepest layer of irony, though, is that Baldwin's father was himself shot on accident while he was in the Marine Corps on Parris Island. Baldwin used to talk about this fairly often, usually on the occasion of Father's Day.
He was shot accidentally on a beach. A guy, the story we were told was that a guy closed the chamber on a .22 caliber rifle. The can fell off the rock or off the limb of the tree or whatever it was. He went over to put the can back on the spot where he was set up a little target. And then he looked at the rifle and wasn't, and just discharged the round. And it went off the ground and hit my father in the stomach.
Oh, wow.
My dad was shot clean through the abdomen. He had a hole clean through his body. And when we were younger, my dad, he got shot in the front and had a, kind of a snake-like scar there. And in his back, you could stick your finger in a hole.
Oh, man. Oh, my God.
Wow. Like a dent in his back. We were kids. We'd be like, all of our childhood, we were like, show us your hole, your bullet hole. Dad. Right. Your bullet hole.
In Baldwin's memoir, Nevertheless, and in a 2009 HuffPo piece that I found, link in description, on the occasion of Father's Day, Alec also claimed that his father's early death from cancer may have been related to the inhalation of lead dust from working on the riflery range, which was supposedly unventilated. In his book, Alec said that the school disposed of the brickwork in the rifle range when his family asked for a sample to test. I am reminded of the missing bullets on the set of Rust that were also supposedly tossed away. In the end, my conclusion is that Alec Baldwin talked his way into the involuntary manslaughter trial by going rogue on George Stephanopoulos. And he bought his way out of the trial/farce by spending untold millions of dollars on the best trial attorneys, Luke Nikas and Alex Spiro, amongst others. I think he had maybe 10 different attorneys at one point. They sprung their trap masterfully. And after sitting with the results for a few days now, I am convinced that Carrie Morrissey's last stand, and especially her total implosion on cross-examination, convinced Judge Summers to dismiss the case with prejudice. Morrissey did appear to lack candor to the court, and when arguing for a Brady violation, where the prosecution's credibility is critical, that was a gut shot through and through.